What if everything you were taught about attraction, relationships, and influence was only a fraction of the truth? What if, beneath centuries of culture and silence, there existed a hidden wisdom about women, one so profound that most people never even glimpse it? This is not just about beauty, charm, or the surface of desire. It is about the silent pull, the unseen gravity, the aura that women carry, the kind of energy that shapes history, art, and even the unspoken choices of men. Women were often expected to remain silent, modest, or obedient. Yet behind the curtain of culture, in families, relationships, and intimate spaces, they carried an energy that transformed destinies. This is a soft power, an influence that does not always roar but instead whispers. Those whispers shape leaders, thinkers, communities, and entire civilizations. Even today, this feminine power flows beneath our modern world. Men often find themselves driven, confused, or transformed by forces they do not fully understand. The feminine is not just external, it lives inside every man as well. Carl Jung described this as the inner feminine, anima, the muse, the mirror, the unseen guide. When embraced, it becomes a source of growth and transformation. When ignored, it acts from the shadows, shaping behavior unconsciously. Silence as energy. Silence has long been misunderstood. Too often it is seen as weakness or submission. But silence can also be a form of power, a subtle energy that speaks without words. It is the pause that unsettles, the restraint that redirects influence, the presence that forces others to confront themselves. Across cultures, women have learned to use silence, sometimes by choice, sometimes by survival, as a way of shaping outcomes. It is in silence that lessons are passed down, where resilience is built, and where energy often hides in plain sight. Philosophers have wrestled with these truths for centuries. Socrates, though he never wrote a word himself, left us with a legacy of questioning. One of his greatest lessons came not from men but from a woman, Diotima, who taught him that love is not about possession but about transformation. Desire begins with attraction but rises through stages, from the beauty of the body, to the beauty of the soul, to the eternal. If we truly look at Socrates' life, there's a lesson hidden between the lines. The great philosopher didn't just teach in the marketplace, he lived philosophy in the tension of his own household. His marriage to Xantippe was not a quiet one. Ancient writers described her as fiery, unyielding, and sharp-tongued. To many, she seemed like a storm that constantly tested Socrates' calm. Yet perhaps that storm was precisely the reason he grew into the thinker we remember today. The feminine is not always soft, gentle, or agreeable. Sometimes it arrives as fire, as resistance, as disruption. Xantippe was not simply a burden, she was a mirror. In her defiance, Socrates faced the limits of his patience. In her sharpness, he was forced to ground his philosophy not just in abstract dialogue but in lived experience. What is wisdom worth if it cannot withstand the storm at home? What is love if it cannot endure resistance? Simone de Beauvoir later expanded this idea, reminding us that one is not born, but rather becomes a woman. That becoming happens within structures of culture, power, and silence. Yet within that silence lies resilience, wisdom, and energy. The modern struggle. In today's world, the same dynamics persist. Men continue to wrestle with desire, influence, and identity, often blind to the ways feminine power moves within and around them. Women continue to carry both the weight of expectation and the gift of transformation. Relationships become battlegrounds not because men and women oppose each other, but because they fail to see beyond illusion. When we reduce women to puzzles to solve or ideals to conquer, we strip away their complexity. When we ignore the feminine in ourselves, we cut ourselves off from transformation. To see clearly requires more than attraction, it requires awakening. Awakening to energy. This awakening is not comfortable. It dissolves illusions, challenges egos, and strips away the cultural scripts we've inherited. But in that discomfort lies liberation. Because the feminine, in its deepest sense, is not manipulation or weakness. It is energy, intuitive, fluid, creative. It does not always roar.
Some timide whisper.
And those whispers, if we listen, can transform us. Philosophy, psychology, and human experience all point to the same truth. The feminine is not just an external force but a mirror. It reflects who we are, who we fear to be, and who we might become. To resist this energy is to resist growth. To embrace it is to step into a deeper form of power, one that transcends domination and enters transformation. Why this matters? This is not about blame. It is not about men versus women. It is about seeing clearly. It is about awakening to the invisible forces that shape our lives. It is about asking, as Socrates did, the dangerous questions that strip away illusion. Growth rarely comes from comfort. Transformation happens when the ego is challenged, when the self is unsettled, when the illusion of control is shattered. The feminine carries that power. It is not manipulation, it is energy, raw, fluid, and often unpredictable. For men, this energy is not merely external. It exists within, as Jung's anima, waiting to be acknowledged. When ignored, it becomes chaos in the shadows. When embraced, it becomes a force of balance and creativity. So the real question is not simply, what do women want? The real question is, what illusions are you holding onto that prevent you from seeing them clearly? And in seeing them, seeing yourself? Because clarity may not bring comfort, but it brings freedom. And freedom is the beginning of true energy. Backhand index pointing right, join the conversation. Share your thoughts in the comments, like this video if it challenged your perspective, and subscribe for more explorations into philosophy, psychology,